This story is from Claiborne County, Alabama, 1994. About 14 years ago, my wife and I were at a lake in the middle of the Talladega National Forest in Alabama. The lake was Sweetwater Lake. From I-20, you get off at Hufflin exit and go through Hufflin and get on Highway 78. You will see signs directing you to Pine Glen, a camping area, and Coleman Lake soon after this point. The roads are dirt roads, but follow the signs to Pine Glen, and about 3 miles up the road on the left you will see a sign for Sweetwater Lake. This road will go down about a half a mile to the lake. It was September 1994. We were fishing in a small boat at the end of a slough early in the morning. We were the only ones on the lake. I think it was a Wednesday and we were all alone. We heard something scream. It started out as a howl and turned into a long, high-pitched scream, and it was so loud it echoed through the mountains. It made the hair stand up on the back of our necks. But that is not all. About a year before that, my stepfather and I were hiking around the same lake. We liked to fish at the spillway on the back side of the lake, and about a half a mile into the hike, we came across a fire break about 20 feet wide. Now keep in mind that we are a pretty good way back into the woods. We have crossed rocks, thorns, and briars, and all kinds of rough ground. And right there across the dried mud in the fire break is a set of footprints dried in the mud. They were not huge. They were about the size of a full-grown man, but they did look human. I just couldn't understand why a man would be that far back in the woods without shoes on. And over the years, there is one thing I have thought about. A Bigfoot would have to grow up. So maybe it was a young Bigfoot. I once worked with a man in Alabama that after we became friends, told me that he and his whole family were picking huckleberries at Sweetwater Lake. The huckleberries grow wild all over the area. He and his wife and 2 children were picking away when they all heard something in the trees. They all turned around to see a hairy man standing there. He said it was a little taller than a man, and as soon as it saw them, it ran off in the woods. It scared them so bad, they left. Sound like a good story to me, guys. We'll check back in for the next story from the Creepy Campfire. I'm 27 years old and I live in Tacoma, Washington. I've been keeping this secret now for about 20 years. In the summer of 1977, I was visiting my grandparents in Graham, Washington. Well, I was running around on one of the many trails around the house, and I ran pretty far from my family that I was with that day. I looked up and there it was. No doubt. Sasquatch. Bigfoot, no more than 55 to 60 feet away from me. I froze in my tracks. It was about 8.5 feet tall, looked to be around 600 pounds. He walked by me and just looked at me and kept walking. This is something I have always wanted to share with the world. I would be more than happy to take a polygraph to prove that this, in no doubt in my mind, was a Sasquatch. I have never been one for having an interest in the unknown or the paranormal, but when someone you trust tells of an experience from their past, sometimes you have to give the benefit of the doubt. I was reading Your True Tales about a month ago and came across a story that took place in New Jersey on or about the area of the Doris Duke Farms. After reading it, my jaw dropped because the story gave the one that was told to me validity. My grandfather told me the story back in 1991, a few years before he passed away. And so it goes. My grandfather worked from the late 50s to the early 70s as a landscaper on the Duke Estate in Somerset, New Jersey. When he told this story to my sister and me, he was foggy when giving the exact dates, but he was still very sharp in explaining it in incredible detail. My grandfather's job was to manicure and care for the lawns in the north section of the property, whatever that meant, and other various duties. He said that in the summer of 1972, one afternoon, he was told by the head groundskeeper that he would be working overtime and that he was needed because a shipment was being delivered from Wisconsin. They needed about 8 men to unload the crate and to bring it into the garden area. That night the truck arrived and it was getting late. The men who were asked to stay for overtime were eager to get things done and over with and be on their way. When the truck pulled up, my grandfather said that the crate was about 8 feet tall and 5 feet wide. When he asked what was inside it, the one in charge said they are exotic trees. What happened next was enough to make half of the team get up and walk off the job and not care about the consequences. When the men started pushing the crate off of the flatbed truck, a blood-curdling scream was unleashed from within the box. All of the men let go of their grip and the crate fell to the floor. As everyone jumped back, realizing that this was anything but trees, the head keeper did all he could to save the contents' real identity and said there was a black bear inside of it. While the men were regaining their composure, most of the help walked off the job. They said that they didn't want to get hurt or mauled dealing with a wild animal without the proper safety equipment. So off they went, including my grandfather. Only 2 men stayed to finish what they were asked. This was the story told to my grandfather. The 2 men managed to get the load on the dolly and drag it into the garden compound. While guiding the crate down the main path, balance was lost and the crate came off the wheels. The crate hit hard enough to crack the side of the crate and lose the side panel, which fell off and exposed the contents. What the 2 remaining men witnessed that night was enough to make them seek employment elsewhere. What I'm trying to tell you is how it was told to me. Inside the crate was a creature that had the shape of a man, but was anything but a man. They couldn't give a height measurement since the creature was in a sitting position, but they said it was huge. It had the shape of a man with a very large frame, only it was covered with black hair. The creature was strapped down and had shackles on its legs and feet and arms. The face didn't look like a man, but had some human features. The workers said it looked more like a monkey or a gorilla. The hair was extremely long and dirty. At one point, one of the men said that they thought this thing was trying to communicate, but all it did was keep on drooling. They were under the impression that this creature was heavily sedated because it couldn't keep its head up straight. It rested its head on its chest. A couple of inches away from the creature's head was an empty water bottle nailed to the wall. On the other side of the creature was an IV stand connected to the wall and stuck in its arm. It might have been used to feed this creature during the transport. One of the oddest parts to this story was that my grandfather was told that this creature was sitting on a rocking chair. I could never understand this. After thinking about it, though, I think it was maybe to prevent this thing from getting cramps during the move. They also said that the odor was overpowering and enough to make anyone pass out. The combined smells of urine, waste, and body odor was rank. My grandfather stuck by this story until the very end. About 2 weeks before his passing away, my sister reminded me to bring it up again and confront him, which I did. There was no need to go over the story again because we both knew how it went. I just asked him, "Papa, remember that crate you had to move in Jersey?" He just looked at me and smiled and said, "Of course." I said, "Did you embellish it all?" He said, "No. There was no reason to. It happened the way I said it happened." I said, "Because now would be the time to tell me." He looked at me and said, "You want to know if I embellished the story? The truth is that I am guilty of the opposite. There was so much I left out. The story was just the beginning. Remember something, I worked there for 2 more years after that. There are things that a young mind should not hear." So I said, "But I'm not a child anymore. I'm sure I can handle what it is that you have to say." Grandfather said, "Tomorrow. I will finish the story. Come back tomorrow." But there was no tomorrow. Grandfather passed away at 2 a.m. that morning in a New York hospital.